listening to a live episode of Surviving the Survivor. We bring you the best guests in all of true crime. Don't forget to subscribe and smash that like button. Here's your host, Emmy Award-winning broadcaster, Joel Waldman.
What's up, STS Nation, and welcome to this Monday edition of Surviving the Survivor, the podcast that promises to bring you the very best guests in all of true crime. And we've got two brand new best guests who I'm about to introduce, along with a familiar face, Tommy Scoville. And we are going to have a very interesting discussion tonight about what you all know I am terrified of, and that is prisons and state prisons. And as I was preparing for today's show, it did not help. Let's put it that way. It made matters much worse for me, and I'll explain why as we go. So bad that the COE called me while I was going back from the recording studio with Carm halfway through recording this book. It's a challenge. Let's put it that way. It's a challenge recording the book, but it is working. Carm's doing an amazing job. But not only did the COE call me, but she got me in the car when I was driving Carm back, and they were yelling at me because some of this stuff is so graphic. They told me I cannot repeat it. So I will be careful with the way I explain some of this stuff. But today's show really revolves around Charlie Adelson. Of course, it is all about justice for Dan Markel, the FSU law professor who was murdered in his driveway back in July of 2014. Fast forward 10 years later, Charlie Adelson, the ex-brother-in-law, is convicted, and the matriarch of the family, Donna Adelson, will be going on trial come this fall, end of September. But Charlie Adelson, as I said, convicted back in November, and he was serving his time awaiting trial at the Leon County Jail in Tallahassee. Then he was shipped off to the Northwest Florida Reception Center Annex in Chipley, Florida. Then they sent him to a place called Wakulla, and we thought this was just a couple of weeks ago. And now we find out last week he's been moved around yet again. And a lot of people are wondering why, and I'm going to ask that exact question to our guest in a moment. Lenard Vare, he has almost 30 years. He's in the bottom right there, has almost 30 years of experience in inmate management and correctional operations in both jails and prisons in California and Nevada. He served as a prison warden with the state of Nevada for 4 years, managing various types of prisons and correctional facilities. Following nearly 18 years of working in state prisons, he served as the director and jail administrator of the Napa County Jail system. There's a couple of DUIs that go on there. Over his career, he also served as a criminal investigator, hostage crisis negotiator, and the list goes on. And Len, I apologize. The COE will get your book cover up. But what is the name of your book? I think it's called The Elephant Keepers. Is that right?
Right. It's called The Elephant Keepers, Reflections of a Prison Warden.
And can we find that on Amazon?
Yes, it's available worldwide.
Worldwide. Excellent. And we'll get into what inspired you to write that in a moment. Meanwhile, we've got Joe Rojas, bottom left-hand corner. He has a bachelor's degree in sociology with a minor in political science from SUNY Old Westbury. He worked State Department of Corrections for Florida in 94 to 95, the Federal Bureau of Prisons from 1995 to 2023, and he just retired. He worked as a correctional officer and then a teacher within the Bureau of Prisons. So obviously, he knows what goes down on the inside, and he trains some of these new young corrections officers. Last but not least, Tommy Scoville. He is a former inmate. The guy ran basically a publicly traded company. He got addicted to pain meds. They took it away from him. The doctor did. It took him down a dark path. He ended up robbing some banks. And the rest, as they say, is history. There's a question already that I'm seeing, I think, from where did it go? And I'm curious, who was it there? But Len, it was for you. And the question is, how in the world did you get into your line of work? How does one become a prison warden? Did you say at the age of, it's Slackjaw right here, when you were 5 years old, did you say one day I'm going to be a prison warden? How did this all happen?
Not at all. Actually, I fell into it by accident. I was trying to go to journalism school to sort of follow the path that you have taken, become a journalist. but I was working in a convenience store, and I got robbed and beaten, and I was saved by an off-duty sheriff's officer. So that sort of changed my path in life. I got interested in criminal justice and sort of what makes people get into crimes. And then that just set my path. And 30 years later, I had a very fulfilling career.
That's interesting. So you were on the receiving end of a crime, of an assault, and that's what propelled your interest in getting into criminal justice?
Yes.
Very interesting. And again, his book is called The Elephant Keepers. Why The Elephant Keepers?
So it's based on a youth offender gang-involved inmate facility that I was operating in the state of Nevada. And it was very violent. We had some of the most dangerous inmates in the state all housed in one location. And we couldn't figure out how to deal with this population. So, it turned out that there was a program on Discovery Channel dealing with elephants in an African game preserve where they were all orphaned, and they were just running around behaving in manner that is not consistent with elephant behavior because they were all teenagers. So what they did is they brought older bulls into the midst of this group of really wild elephants. And what transpired is within weeks, the behavior of the elephants changed. And they started to sort of become more pro-social in how they dealt with each other and the people that were visiting there. So I figured, why not try that in a prison facility? Because human beings sort of are social animals, and we have similar types of needs and wants, etc. So with that in mind, we started bringing in some shot callers and people that were influential in gangs and whatnot from all these different prisons, who all came together, and we created a special unit of mentoring these young gang-involved youth offenders. What happens after about 18 months of running this very violent facility is I went over a year with no incidents of violence. All these gang members learned how to program together and live together, sort of in a peaceful manner. And again, it was all about mentoring. I had to pick the right staff. I had to pick the right individuals who would be the mentors. So for me, Elephant Keepers is generally based on sort of the idea of mentorship. I've had Elephant Keepers myself when I was young. I had older, more experienced corrections personnel, which sort of showed me the way. So for me, it's not only for the correction staff, it's also for people incarcerated who sometimes need just a guiding hand or the right path to sort of set them in a way that works best.
And it's a great title. It's not an expected title for a book about a prison warden. You see the cover of the book right there. And Len, I assume that is you in the trench coat facing the elephant?
I wish it was, but my publisher got someone better looking.
Well, there you go. Needless to say, there it is. Lindsay Shea right here. I love how Joel says robbing some banks so casually. That brings a question to mind. Tommy Scoville, the very first time you resorted to robbing a bank, what the hell did you say to yourself right after you left that bank the first time? I mean, were you like shitting in your pants or what?
You know what? I was just so desperate, at that juncture in my life. Yeah, I was. I mean, the adrenaline. I've done a lot of crazy stuff in my life. The adrenaline from that's probably about as thick as it gets. But it was a drug. I needed heroin so badly that I would rather have been dead than not have it. So the bank robbery didn't seem like it was all that risky.
And from the time you left the bank with whatever money you had until you bought heroin, how long was that?
25 minutes.
Yeah,
25 minutes. And that's because I had to get rid of a car. There was a lot of stuff I had to getaway car, some other stuff I had to get rid of. But it was the first thing I did, to be sure.
Kids, as Tommy Scoville will tell you, don't do drugs. You get hooked on it. Joe, same question to you, and then we're going to get kind of dig deep into Charlie's new home and what it's all about. And it's, trust me when I tell you, it is not a pleasant place. But Joe, you started off, in the early to mid 90s. Same question as Len. What got you involved in the Department of Corrections? You started in Florida here and then ended up at the Bureau of Prisons.
Well, I didn't start off to become a CO. I was actually going to go into law school. And so I was living in Vegas, and I was studying to go to Vegas, got accepted to one or two colleges, but then I had a change of plans. My father, who lived in Florida, wound up having cancer. So I wound up moving to Florida to take care of my mom and dad. And he passed away. But by then, my law school dreams has exasperated. I had to make ends meet, went into the academy for the Department of Corrections, started there, and then transferred over to the feds. So that's how I became a corrections officer and a union advocate, because I was going to go into law school for civil rights and prosecution.
So the $64,000 question that everyone has been asking since Charlie Adelson was moved yet again this past Wednesday is why. And everyone's kind of got to take. Tommy and I talked about it. I'm going to get to Tommy in a minute, but let's just go back in reverse order here. Joe, this is an inmate, a convicted murderer now, who basically helped set up a murder for hire plot. He was convicted of that, and he was awaiting trial, and through the trial was in the Lenard County Jail in Tallahassee. They send him to a reception area. It's called the Northwest Florida Reception Area. It's an annex in Chipley. Yeah, you're familiar with it. He's there for a little bit.
I used to work at the Central Florida Reception Center. So there's three of them. There's North Florida Reception Center, Central Florida Reception Center, and South Florida Reception Center in the state of Florida.
And by the way, I was floored to find out there's 50 prisons in Florida, 50, but there's like 147 institutions. And Joe, what's the difference between the prisons and I think there's 80,000 inmates? I have to look at my notes, but yeah, there's 50 prisons in Florida, 80,000 inmates that are housed in 143 statewide facilities. So, Joe, what are these facilities if they're not prisons? You have 50 prisons, but 143 facilities.
What's the difference?
It
depends on the institution, what type of level this inmates incarcerated. You got from highs to lows to camps. Like at the Central Florida Reception Center, we had a maximum security prison, which is the main unit, and we had an east unit, which was mid-level, and then we also had a camp. So it depends what the crime, the sentence, which is probably the most important thing, and that's where they ship you at, and that's where you do your residency or your time, as they say. It varies.
Wow. By the way, Sweet and Salty says, I love elephants. That is Carm's favorite animal in the world. After her and my dad retired, they went to Thailand, and there's a photo of two enormous elephants sitting on their behinds, and my mom and dad are like between each of their sets of legs. And my dad said he was terrified. Carm loved it. The thing sits down on you the wrong way, and you're a goner. But Joe, before we move off of you, your opinion, why was he sent? He was obviously the reception area you have to go to. Then they sent him to this place, Wakulla, which used to be a faith-based prison. And then just a couple of weeks, I think, I don't know if it was weeks, he's moved again to Columbia Correctional. Why did they move him again? What's your best guess?
It could be several reasons. Number one, protective custody, because you don't know if his life was threatened, and that's a good possibility. Number two, maybe for programming, maybe the type of facility that they house for this particular inmate fits his programming needs. So it could be one or two reasons: PC, protective custody, because maybe his life was threatened, or programming. Maybe the new facility fits his programming, because every inmate gets interviewed, and they try to put, well, from my understanding, working for the state and for the feds, try to put you in a certain institution that fits your needs so you can program.
Len, you're up next on that question. He was moved a bunch of times in a short period of time. what's your best guess as to why he was moved? He went obviously to the reception area. You got to do that. You got to get introduced and all that. But then they sent him to this place, Wakulla, and almost right away sent him to a really bad place, Columbia Correctional. What's your best guess as to why they did that so quickly?
So I can tell you based on my personal experience, when I was warden in Nevada, we had O.J. Simpson come to prison. And what happens when you have a person of, notoriety? There's been enough news articles in the media about that person. People start to take notice. They start to pay attention. And, prisons are, not separate kind of environments where people are not aware of what's going on in the world, right? So they watch the news, they read the news, they know what's going on in the world. So if someone, in my example, someone like O.J. Simpson comes into your prison, you're going to have to deal with all kinds of issues. First off, logistically, where do you place someone of that stature safe from other people? There's going to be lots of people that are going to be clamoring to be in the same area as that individual. They are going to either want to befriend them or they're going to want to harm them. So those are the two things that would be of great concern. You also have in this, when I was researching this individual, Mr. Adelson, he had other co-defendants. There were some gang members that were involved in it. There's any variety of reasons that people that were involved in the crime that he was eventually, going to prison for, they may have some animosity towards him for some reason or the other, because, they're in prison also. So, any of those gang members or any gangs that they belong to or people that are associated with them, as soon as the prison officials are notified of those kinds of things, they move them. There's also people dropping kites, which is kind of, you'll get someone send a note and it will be anonymous, and they'll say, if you don't move him by tomorrow, he's going to be injured, or something bad's going to happen. And once you get a notice like that, prison officials really, they're sort of bound to do something about it. They have to move into protective custody. Again, if you go into protective custody in a prison setting, a lot of times protective custody is not the safest location either, because there's this thing called PC from PC, which is protective custody individual. See, I think you agree with me there. There are people that go into protective custody who then have to be protected from the people who are already in protective custody, because just because you're in PC doesn't make you any less vulnerable or any less dangerous. So it becomes a logistical nightmare when it comes to someone of this notoriety.
If one of, I think Len and Tommy might have mics on their shirt. Just be careful because it's banging around. I don't know. Oh, you don't. Okay. All right. If you do, just you might just want to hold it out a little bit. But Grant Lloyd says Tommy is a great example of how people can change and get back on the right track. Congrats on your journey, Tommy. Kudos to you. Tommy, what the hell is, every time you're on, man, I learn all these prison jargon. What is flying a kite? Did someone basically dropping a kite? So what does that mean? And so someone basically dropped a note saying Charlie could be a goner if you don't get him out of here. And we're giving
that happens. Yeah, that happens now. And sometimes guys drop kites on themselves. Right? If a guy's trying to get off the yard, they call it a dry PC move. A guy will write out a big long, hey, if this dude isn't moved by 11 tomorrow, he owes the dope dealer on the yard $4,000, and he writes a nice long letter about how if he doesn't get moved. And they're usually pretty slick. They go and look at the boxes to see who dropped the letter off, and I mean they're pretty good. But if they can't figure out who put it, then the guy's gone. They got to get him off the yard. He's right, because they don't. If the threat comes out to be credible and the guy gets stabbed the following day, then that becomes kind of a bit of a nightmare. But
now I'm a very visual, tactile guy. So when you say dropping a kite, do they literally drop a note for the corrections officer? Like, how does that work?
Yes.
Like, you put something
it's
on a
usually really small piece of paper, and because they're going to want to conceal it with a letter or something else. And when they go to drop their mail in, they're going to drop that little piece of paper into the box with their letter. And it's called dropping a kite, you know. And you can send a kite. That's completely different. That's when you're sending some stuff you don't want, you know, staff to read. That's correspondence between inmates, is sending a kite. Dropping a kite is not the same thing. That's usually considered very bad form.
In the movies, you always see them tying a note or something to like a clothespin or something, and then they slide it down to another. Does that happen? Does that really happen?
Absolutely.
Or is that, it does
every day, every minute of every day. Yeah, shooting a line, Cadillacing, car, and whatever you call it. And you know, in Nevada they call it Cadillacing because
we call them Cadillac.
I had a 9 number. Yeah, I went through the Nevada system. I had a 9 number. Yeah, and for my other friend, I was an 048 in the feds. So I got you both covered. I got you.
Tommy Scoville, I'm just going to start using these in everyday life so people don't screw around with me. I'm just going to be like, I'm dropping a kite.
When you get good at it, you get good at it, you're set.
I'm going to be like, I'm Cadillac. I'm going to pull up at Starbucks and be like, yo, I'm Cadillac, and get me my venti green tea immediately. I'll be Cadillacing.
But if you drop hey, anybody flying a kite, they're going to look at you like, I'm sorry, what?
You can Cadillac. You can send a Cadillac between floors also. So
really?
Oh, sure. They can drop it off of a 3rd tier to a 2nd tier to the 1st tier, and then it's shot into a variety of different locations, and it's incredible to watch. Just seeing this note just flying all over the place.
Yep.
So, Len, what is a corrections officer supposed to do when you see that? Are you guys supposed to retrieve that, or do you allow it to happen?
Well, when I was a new corrections officer, I thought running behind it and chasing it would be the best thing, except you can never catch it. So, you know, as you get older, you decide the best thing to do is stand back and watch and wait for where it finally ends up, and then go into that cell and get it. No point in chasing this thing around. You're bound to get hurt. You know, fall on your face, and you know, people just laugh at you.
And I'm so, everyone knows this. I could talk for 9 hours. You guys are in trouble. You might be here a while. But what do they attach the paper to? What is it on? It's on like a fishing line. What do they do?
So you take your sheet. You take your bed sheet and you strip the all of the strings out, or you can do it off of a towel, and you spin the line. Right, you actually make a line out of it so that it's super thin. But you spin it in one direction, turn it in half, spin it the other, just like they make regular rope. And you make it in about 9-foot sections. You tie them together, and once you get about 100 feet of it, you take usually the end of like toothpaste, because they'll give it to you for free. So an empty toothpaste thing, and put some wet toilet paper in there, so you got some weight, and that's what you tie onto it. And then a couple of staples out of a piece of paper or a book, so that you got hooks so you can catch the other person's line, because there's a sort of a crossing of a line, so you can pull it back in. And when people are good at it, you would be blown away at how fast you can get something from one place to another. It's incredible.
It's like the ingenuity of some of these inmates is wild. Like if they use their brains in the right way on the outside, these guys could be running companies. It's insane. Joe, to you, on this notion of dropping a kite. So let's say that this happened, just hypothetically. Let's say Charlie Adelson was in Wakulla, and someone dropped a kite and said, "This guy's going to get shanked. He's dead man walking." How seriously, when corrections officers get these notes that something's going to happen, how seriously does he take them? Because I think the perception is things are kind of lackadaisical a little bit. By the way, Len, I covered OJ out. I think was it Lovelock, Nevada? Is that the name of the town?
I was a warden there.
Yeah. Oh, really? I was out there for his right before his release for Fox News, and it was. Where did you live? It's in the middle of. We drove like 2 hours from Reno. I remember it was in the middle of absolutely nowhere.
Right, and yeah, so there's towns like Fallon and Fernley, which are about 45 miles from the prison. That's usually where the staff used to live. I mean, incidentally, by the time when you were there, I had already left the state and started working in California. So yeah, I'm sure I would have missed you.
Quick news story. We got there in the middle of the night, and we're driving on desert roads, and we can't see a thing. And all of a sudden we just see, like, we pull off the main road and see a trailer home. And it was like a fight to the death for who had to go out and ask directions, because we all thought we were dying if we knocked on this door. And I think eventually I lost and had to go do it. The photographers always make the reporters do everything. So I'm literally in the middle of a desert on a dirt road, knocking on a trailer home door in the middle of nowhere with cacti all around. I'm like, I am definitely not surviving this night. Joe, I'm sorry I asked you. Joe, I'm sorry I asked you this question, but so let's say someone drops a kite on Charlie, and the CO reads it. What's the protocol for that? How serious do you have to take it?
You take it very serious, because you never know what might happen. So immediately you notify your supervisor in charge, either your lieutenant in the feds or your sergeant in the state, and usually they'll look at the note, and they should remove the inmate, ask him some questions, and isolate him, because you never want something like that to happen. Because it's prison, and somebody like that notoriety, you can't take any chances. Like I've had Whitey Bulger, I had Larry Nassar in my unit, so I've had some high profile inmates. So anytime you get a note like that, you have to act on it and take it serious.
Wow.
And
Joe,
yes.
I'm sorry, Larry Nassar. I didn't mean to interrupt. Larry Nassar is obviously infamous. He's the doctor for the U.S. gymnastics team that was convicted. I think he's serving a life sentence. But I know chomos are bottom of the rung. Mm-hmm. I do know that. What is his prison life like?
Well, he's in a specialized unit with people like him, with
Coleman.
At Coleman, yeah, and it's at Coleman too. There's 3 institutions where high notoriety inmates and people like Larry Nassar and Whitey Bulger go to. There's one in Tucson, there's one in Terre Haute, and there's one in Coleman. We gotten two of those guys, and so they're put in a housing unit, believe it or not. And Whitey Bulger and that's actually we're doing fine, because they don't mingle with the regular inmates at normal hours. They have their own meals, they have their own, separate institutions and stuff like that in programming. So they belong in a special unit. So they actually work out well in those type of environments.
So Colleen is saying, I think I did hear this, that Larry Nassar was stabbed a few months ago in prison, and not very long ago at the federal prison in Tucson is where Derek Chauvin, the now infamous police officer. What's it like for you, Joe? I was going to call you Jose. His real name is Jose. But what's it like for you? I mean, how problematic is it when a guy like Derek Chauvin, who's so high profile, does get stabbed, and he got stabbed many, many times? What's the blowback on you guys, the guys running the prison, the DOC guys?
Right now in the Bureau of Prisons, we have a severe staffing crisis. So that's the main issue. We are so, like, for instance, like on the weekends, I can probably put up a roster. We're probably 158 bodies short on the weekends in the compound. Okay. So when Larry Nassar got stabbed, I actually changed the narrative. Instead of being about Larry Nassar, it was about our staffing crisis. And if you want to protect these inmates who deserve to be protected, you got to staff the prisons. You can't run a prison without staffing. It's impossible. It's the safety of the inmates, and it's also the safety of the staff. And so as a union person that I am, that was my calling card. It's just, you got to staff these prisons. You got to staff. Like I said, look, I was a CO and a teacher. As a teacher, I'm constantly being pulled to work a housing unit. And so it's a bad cycle within the Federal Bureau of Prisons right now, and the staffing crisis. And you're going to get stuff like that. You're going to get violence like that, because we can't watch them all the time because we don't have the staffing.
We're going to get into Charlie, I promise, in the specifics. But as you know, I have a crazy fascination with this. Joe, did you ever have a a close call in your career where you were either assaulted or felt threatened?
Well, I've been in a few scuttles.
Yeah.
I've been in a few fights. I had to save the life of an inmate who was getting beat down, and we're trained. You jump into danger, and to save the inmate's life, I had to jump into pull an inmate out, and in the middle of pulling an inmate out, I got hit. I remember coming home with blood in my pants. My wife was like, "What's going on?" So, but that's you're trained to go into emergencies, not run away. And so, and this will happen on a Saturday, on the rec yard, and it was like right by my office in education, and I was the first one there, called for assistance, waiting for the assistance. But as you can see, when I was watching, the inmate was really getting his, serious. Have to jump in, and this is before we had any pepper spray or batons or anything. It's just I just had a radio and keys, and that's it. So
wow, it's scary.
So yes.
Yeah. Kudos or welcome, I should say, to Jared Ross, and kudos for joining the chat. Staffing issues in the state prison system. For those who do not know, Jared went to high school with Charlie Adelson and was actually good friends with Dan and Wendy. Wendy recently defriended him on Facebook, which is probably a benefit to him. Tommy Scoville. I know you were in a couple of scraps in prison, but what is the sort of line of respect between inmates and the COs? I mean, have you seen corrections officers attacked for no reason, or is there a beef that precipitates it? What causes inmates to turn on corrections officers?
Now, I can tell you that whenever I saw it go bad, it was gang related. It was always something where there was a perceived beef between a staff member and an inmate, and their entire group took that as disrespectful, and things went bad. I know that in our car, right, the white boys had if you had a problem with a staff member, then you went to the shot caller about it. Like if you were to do anything with staff, you're in so much trouble. Like it's the end of your life. It's the end of your career. If you fire on staff and you do it without permission, like I hit a staff member. Like I got in trouble for this. I went to the SMU in the special management unit, but I went to my shot caller and told him everything that was going on. And there was like a period of time where they said, fill out a BP8, BP9 on the guy, keep doing it. And then he said something in
what's that? What's a BP8 and BP9? We don't know. What's that?
I'm sorry, you're right. It's it's a grievance process starts at the Bureau of Prisons. Like the right. BP8 is that says I couldn't have fixed this just between me and staff, so I got to take it to the next level. And then the next level past that, and it's just a lot of paperwork, and they keep getting thicker. And by the time you get to that BP11, there's like 9. You got to press down so hard because it's going to 9 different places. There's so many carbons on it. Never actually won one either, but I filed a lot.
Again, by the way, next time I'm ordering my strawberry passion, whatever at Starbucks, I'm going to tell the barista I'm going to fill out a BP8 on you if you don't hurry
That's
up.
It. Don't make me. I'll take this to the 12. That's what you said.
I'm dropping all this. I'm dropping all this in real life.
The informal process has started.
But there's an incredible amount of respect. There's an incredible amount of respect between the inmates and the staff. I saw that especially like with our car. I've very rarely had any staff member. I had one problem with a staff member the entire time I was in prison. Every other time, and he turned out to be a bad dude. He ended up he's in the feds now doing time. He was a staff member that was bringing in phones and all kinds of other stuff. Unbeknownst to me, I probably would have been getting along with him if I had known that. But for real, I would, But he just said a lot of really, really rank stuff, and eventually I lost it and hit him. But there's a lot of respect. I think that there's almost guys would say how much time you got left convict, and you'd say 5 years, and the staff members say I got 6. I mean they're going to their retirement to walk out the door too, and you'd hear staff members say that all the time. I got 3 left, man. I got 3 left. So there's sort of like it's kind of like you're both doing time a little bit. So there's a lot of respect there.
That's the way I look at it. We're both doing time, so as a staff member, I'm going to give that inmate the utmost respect, and I expect the same thing back. And that's all it is. They got to do their time. They miss their families. XYZ. I got to do my job. My job is security, and since I'm into the programming aspect now, make sure they get the proper programming, and that's it. No funny stuff.
Nope.
By the way, Joe Rojas, a crazy resemblance to the COE's dad, by the way. I wonder if anyone else knows. I wonder if Space Coast is on here. But
speaking of which,
there you go. Len,
he had 2
go
of them
ahead,
sent
man.
out to them.
Yeah, so I was just going to talk about the times when staff gets assaulted. Obviously, it's a lot about respect, and in my experience, those times when staff did get assaulted, it was those guys that I don't know what else to call them, but knuckleheads. I mean, they almost asked for it because the inmates have a lot more to lose when they strike at staff. All day long, the power of the law is with the agency, right? So you can throw somebody in solitary, you can file charges against them, all kinds of stuff. So inmates are hard pressed to take that step unless they're desperate or someone disrespects them in a very strong way. The other group that are unpredictable is a group that we haven't talked about is the mentally ill. The seriously mentally ill people are unpredictable. They go off their medications. There are people with bipolar, schizophrenic inmates that they don't even know what they're doing. At some point, I mean, there are agencies that just won't even file charges against them. It's just because they can't control their behavior. So there is a large number of staff assaults that occurs in jails and prisons around the country by people who are dealing with mental illness.
I can tell it's going to be a nice, long, hefty conversation because I'm again fascinated by this. So I'm going to drop in some of the homework I did. In the state of Florida, 75% of the housing units do not have air conditioning. Now, the Florida Department of Corrections put out a statement on this. Graphics ready and CCI B-roll. Thank you, COE. The FDC, Florida Department of Corrections, said in a statement that all, quote unquote, the most vulnerable inmate populations, including the infirm, the mentally ill that Len was just talking about, pregnant and geriatric, are housed in air-conditioned units, and newer institutions have air conditioning. But if you're just a regular old prisoner, you're screwed. Sorry. And that's Charlie Adelson. So we're going to, again, get to Charlie in a moment. But I just had a question up. The question, Tommy, was essentially, how is Charlie now communicating with his family? Does he have one of these tablets, one of these JPay tablets at Columbia? How is he reaching out to, can't talk to his mom because his mom's in jail, but
Right.
How's he reaching out to his father or his sister, who he's not on great terms with, or anyone else?
I don't know if in the state facility, I mean, if in Florida they're handing out tablets, I don't know if that's how that one is set up. But you know what, real quick, this is just from an inmate's point of view. If I think personally, if any of the things that, like, if it was a kite, if it was a threat, man, guys inside are real good at getting information to the outside. Like, honestly, because I talk a lot, I have a prison channel and stuff like that. The number of people that reach out to us and say, hey, I know somebody that's in there, and they were talking about, I personally, here's my take, because I've seen somebody ask like 9 times. I think personally that this might have just been one of those situations. Like, I remember once I walked onto a yard and was 100 yards walking with my tub. It was in the state of Nevada. And a CO walked up and said, turn around, you're leaving. I went, I just got here. What are you talking about? He's like, yep, you got to keep separate here. And I didn't even know what a keep separate was. I go, I got a what? He's like, you got to keep separate. You can't be here. I was like, I was clueless. But somebody on that yard had said, I'm afraid of this dude, right? You can fill out a list of all the people you're afraid of. Now, if I show up on that yard, right, and that person's there, all of a sudden you're getting kicked out. Those kind of things, it's harder to get the rumor back out, because all of a sudden it's like, I don't know why they yanked him off the yard, but he disappeared. I think it was probably something administrative, because there's no rumors coming out that are any good. Sometimes, like when I was in the Fed, this was the prison they wanted me at, right? Like, you're going to Terminal Island, but if Terminal Island is jam full, I'm going to go to whatever that second choice was. And I'm going to sit there for 4 months until that bed opens at Terminal Island. And then they're going to end up moving me. So sometimes you just be sitting there programming, doing your thing, thinking you're having a great day. And they're like, roll your crap up, you're leaving. you know, and you go, what did I do, or why am I leaving? Because wherever they had originally wanted you, that bed space is now open. And I can't imagine what it's there. What you said, 150 people are missing just off of the Tucson compound. That's terrifying, man. That's how many staff members are there that 150 could show up not being in. The federal system is, when I was in Victorville in the feds, there were 2 COs. I got nothing against COs. I really don't. But there were 2 of them that ended their time on this planet in the parking lot. And it was within about a 30-day period of time. You could hear I was in the hole for both of them. So I was right near the parking lot. And that's a tough job, man. For real. I have no animosity whatsoever toward any correction staffers. That for real. I think you guys do a hard job.
For sure. You know, whenever you're considering a job doing time, it ain't a fun job. It's not an easy job. Let's put it that way. But Len, what's going on with because there are massive worker, DOC shortages, staff shortages in Florida, and we get Joe's take on that too. But what's going on? Is it just too hard a job with too many threats that people don't want the work?
So I do a lot of litigation work, both on the plaintiff side and sometimes on different departments of corrections or sheriff's agencies on different lawsuits that come up. So sometimes it's plaintiffs' lawsuits and sometimes defending different agencies. So I'm very selective in the types of lawsuits I look at. In general, so I'm working currently in about 26 different states. So I have a pretty good perspective of what different agencies are doing, different local sheriff's departments to large state agencies. This is a nationwide problem. This isn't just in Florida. This isn't just in California, Nevada. It's a nationwide problem. Here's my take on it. It is one of the most underpaid, underappreciated professions out there. The public perception of a corrections professional is sort of tainted. It's based on old movies. It's based on this ideology that, these people can't be regular cops, so they go and work in prisons. And so they're like second tier or third tier. What they fail to understand is it takes a lot of personal sacrifice. In California, they say corrections is the toughest beat, right? And that's for a reason, because when you go into a prison, you're surrounded literally by almost anybody that can take your life all day long, as opposed to a police officer on the street who will meet probably 80% decent people, and 20% of the time they're dealing with all of these other things. So it is the toughest beat on the job, and it is underappreciated. A lot of times, some of it is unfortunately funding. Prisons are antiquated. They're just old. I worked in a prison that was 150 years old. Imagine working in a facility with pipes that are 150 years old that are bursting all the time, leaks all the time, gas leaks, electric issues, all kinds of issues all the time.
NSP. I lived in it. I lived in it.
There you go. It is now a museum. So thankfully they found some dinosaur.
Which place is this?
He was
referring to Nevada State Prison. He has to be NSP.
Yes.
It was the nastiest facility on planet Earth.
Wow.
It was the first territorial gas chamber in the country back in the 1800s something. But yes, those are the types of facilities, and I'm doing litigation work on behalf of plaintiffs in some states where the staffing levels are so low, and because I'm in the middle of litigation, I do not want to name the state, but the staffing level is so low that the gangs are literally running the prisons, and it's to the point where there's been 15 to 20 murders just in the last year because there's no staff. And some of the officers belong to gangs, and they have been recruited and they have been groomed. So sort of like that movie, The Departed, they were groomed to become corrections officers. So, I know they're not really corrections officers, because that to me is sort of a shameful way to kind of be in the profession, but that's what they do. And they get into the profession for the purposes of carrying out the gang's mission. And that has happened There's been DOJ investigations. There's been multiple arrests with the feds involved in that. And if you do Google searches on, federal agencies arresting corrections officers for being members of gangs, there's a lot of news out there. So without saying the names of agencies, it becomes increasingly dangerous. And, as a new person, a new recruit, you go into that facility, you look at it, and you're terrified. I couldn't tell you the number of people that would come into work in some of these facilities last 2 weeks, and they're like, okay, this is it. I'm done. Mm-hmm. There is a better way to make a living than work here. The other part is there are states in the US right now where I can get a job at a Walmart and I make more money than working in a state prison. And that's really sad. And
what is the salary? What is the salary, average salary for a corrections officer in Nevada?
Nevada it's been a few years since I left.
Roughly.
Probably about 50 to 60,000. And that's about, but again, here's what happens is if you try to go buy a house in Nevada, if you try to buy a house in Reno or Carson City or whatever, it used to be $200,000. Now it's like $700,000. So your pay doesn't go up, and you're almost living in poverty, and you have to work extra overtime and take on other jobs, etc., just to make a living.
Or carry in one cell phone a month. Or carry in one cell phone a month.
Tommy, what's a cell phone?
Yeah, it could be thousands of dollars.
How much? How much?
Yeah, I mean, when I was in there, they were about $1,800 to buy a cell phone.
Wow. And Tommy, where do they keep the cell phone so they don't get caught? I'm afraid to ask.
First of all, there's not a lot of cell phone left, right? They go with the smallest cell phone possible, and anything that can be chipped off of that thing other than the screen and the ability to dial and things like that. I mean, they really get them down to the bare necessity, and then it goes exactly where you think it does.
Wow.
That's your all-in moment, I promise. You got to,
Tommy, by the way, I had a question for you earlier when you were saying that the CO was like, you got to get off get out of here, or pack your things. When you're in prison, like, what were your belongings in there? How long would it take you to, if you had to leave your cell and go to somewhere else, how long would it take you to pack up your stuff?
Well, if I was on a yard where I could walk around, when I was in the special management unit, every 21 days we had to move. I was at Lewisburg, Pennsylvania at the SMU, and every 21 days you had to move. And I'm telling you, you got about 9 minutes to pack that crap up and be ready to go to the next cell. And you're handcuffed, and you got to carry the stuff that you got while handcuffed. So you had to be very good at it. But in a regular yard, take you about 15 minutes. I mean, there's not a whole lot. You even if you have a lot of stuff, it's hard to accumulate more than 2 laundry bags. That's about it.
Wow. Or a gray tub.
Or a gray tub. That's right. Yeah, they were yellow when I was there. Yeah. Foot Locker.
Jenny Price here for Joe. As you get prisoners who are just the dregs, do your personal feelings get in the way at all? I could not guard Larry Nassar. I just couldn't do it. What do you do? By the way, Jersey girl. I wouldn't last 2 hours, let alone 2 weeks. But Joe, what do you do if you have a prisoner you really can't stand, or you're morally offended by this?
Look, man, working for 28 years, actually almost 30 years. To me, no offense, but they're inmates. I don't look at the name. I don't look at the title. I don't. It's fun because I actually got that question asked to me by one of the victim's parents of Larry Nassar. She actually reached out to me, and we became good friends. She saw an interview that I did on CNN the day of Larry Nassar's stabbing. She reached out to me and she thanked me because the narrative was about staffing, wasn't about Larry Nassar, and we became great friends. And she asked me the same question. I go, look, nothing for nothing. I just look at them as any other inmate. I don't care who they are. They have rights. I have a duty. I'm a professional, and that's where it stops. So I really don't look at titles. Like I said, I've seen football players, Stephen Smith. I've seen, like I said, Larry Nassar, Whitey Bulger. We had the Somali pirate. I could go go on and on and on. I could go on and on and on some of the inmates that I've had. I can't remember his name. Worked for me as an orderly. Madden Shoes.
Steve Madden.
He was my orderly at FCC Coleman at the Low for 4 years. But again, they just
But he was
I'm
doing
sorry.
pretty easy time, right? It was like a white collar crime, right?
But it was at the low. He was still at the low.
Yes.
So at the low, it's a little different. You know, it's not as tough as a penitentiary, but it's still at the low. And, you know, like any other prison, you know, they tell you when you wake up, when you sleep, when you work, when you go to bed.
I did time with the Somali pirate. I was at FCI. Yeah, the FCI in Terre Haute. He was at FCI Terre Haute with me.
I think he went from Coleman to Terre Haute. Because remember, like I was saying, there's only 3 institutions these high profile inmates can go to: Tucson, Coleman, and Terre Haute.
Wait, isn't it? What about the
street at the FCI?
Yeah, what about the Supermax?
The fellas will kill me if I don't.
Wait, what about the
USP, you guys?
What about the Isn't there a Supermax in Florence, Colorado, or something?
Florence, Colorado. Yes,
but those are the worst of the worst of the worst, right? I mean, that's like the Unabomber,
the Krasinski, the Boston the Boston guy, and so on. Rudolph, the shoe bomber. Yeah, all those guys. Yes.
Yeah, and those guys basically live in a prison cell their whole life. They don't leave, right?
Yes.
They're big.
Correct.
They don't go out.
Wow, that's crazy. Okay, Tommy Scoville, Charlie Adelson, and we saw this. He's been described as unusually charming by past guests. Will his superficial charm help him at all with staff in prison? I mean, we saw him on the stand. He's going to be a hell of a lot more likable than I think Donna Adelson will be, but he does have sort of a charm and a charisma. How is that going to work or not work for him in Columbia Correctional?
Truthfully, I mean, it doesn't get you far. More often than not, it's going to get you a compromising staff shot, and that gets you shipped. I mean, you'll do that once. You try.
Wait, it's going to get. Hold on. So you say stuff I don't. It's like Black Widow is here. She's from Ireland. I can't understand her. Prison talk. I can't understand you. What happened?
Okay, so if you get too friendly with somebody, right? If you use that charm, they call it compromising staff. In theory, there should be a lot of yes, sir, no, sir, yes, ma'am, no, ma'am. There shouldn't be a whole lot of where do you live? You know, what kind of stuff do you do? Because that leads to people carrying stuff in and all kinds. So they're, at least in the BOP, man, they're serious as hell about that. Like they're not, people get those shots and get sent out. A shot is when you get written up for something. They don't call it a write-up, they call it a shot,
right. Tommy, Chris B wants to know, is Charlie going to be able to make phone calls anytime like he did in jail? He was on the phone constantly with his mother. What's the difference in state prison?
Well, in the feds, I mean, once you get to prison, you're limited to the amount of time you get.
Yes.
You don't get unlimited minutes. In the feds, I think we got 300 minutes a month.
Yeah.
And same with the state. You're not going to be able to, because I worked the state many years ago. But it's the same thing, and they'll cut you off too. You only got a certain amount of minutes. I think 15 minutes.
15 minutes.
15 minutes, and they cut it off.
Is that a day? I'm sorry, Joe. Is that 15 minutes a day he can call out?
No, but you can blow your whole 300 minutes in one day.
Yeah, because
if you sit there and call one after the other, then you're done for the month.
Because you got a lot of amount of time of minutes or money into your account, and like you said, you can blow it in a day, and that's it. Then you can't talk for the rest of the month.
There's also a guy behind you.
Right.
There's also a guy behind you waiting on
Yeah, that's right.
And if the phone's upside down, don't touch it. Right?
Yeah. So the answer is no. It's not like jail.
Hold on a second. That went over my head. What does that mean if it's upside down?
It's on hold. It's on hold.
Yeah, it's on hold.
Okay.
Like you put it like this.
All this is going over my head.
That means I'm going to the bathroom. Don't touch this phone. I'll be right back.
Exactly
yeah, this is not a fraternity. No offense, that I want to be a part of. I don't want to even understand.
I'm sorry. Usually it's a bad dude that puts a phone upside down because normally another guy would kill you for that. But if a guy gets away with that, then don't touch his phone because he's probably earned that phone right.
Oh,
but you're gonna have a lot of people screaming at you if you're gonna be on the phone all day, and there's like 3 phones in a unit, and there's about 85 guys. They all have to share that 3 phones. You're not gonna go far spending all day on the phone.
By the way, Sue says, Joel, working in the federal prison for 25 years and a warden for 7. You would last 2 days. I worked in 11 institutions and happy to be retired. You'll be fine. Thank you for your service, Sue. And you and Len have something in common. You're both wardens. Tommy, forget you, Tommy. Let me ask Joe this, and then we'll go. I want to get these guys' perspective. Joe, Charlie Adelson was a very successful periodontist. He drove a Ferrari. He dated women, let's put it that way, many women at one time. And he's now been in this prison Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. I have to use my hands, 5 days. What is he experiencing right now in one of the worst prisons in Florida, which is Columbia? By the way, ranked the 7th worst prison in the entire state of Florida.
I would probably say he's in shock, and he might be on suicide watch. And I would probably put him on suicide watch because of his notoriety. Living the high life, going to a prison like Columbia, it is shocking. It's culture shock. So he's probably scared, probably nervous, looking behind his back, and they should put him on suicide watch for his own safety.
How easy, Len? How easy? I don't want. I have to be careful here. We use the word unalive here because that other word will get us in trouble. But how easy or difficult is it to unalive yourself behind bars, Len, if you really want to do it?
So I do lots of prison and jail suicide cases, and I train staff in different agencies on preventing inmate suicides. And the reality is that there are many opportunities, facilities. I mean, I've seen guys stuff themselves with socks and sort of choke on it. I've seen guys set themselves on fire. Not just one, I mean, multiple people, about, I think, 3 people in my career that set themselves on fire. Multiple hangings, lots of people cut their wrists. So these are, and overdose. I even had a guy that crawled up a shower and did a head dive into the tile to sort of, damage his brain.
Did he succeed in that? Oh,
he survived, but he ended up being in a permanent disabled state. So, these kinds of things happen. People jump off tiers. They do all kinds of things to end their lives. And it is a constant struggle to identify those people that may be suicidal and then take all the steps that you can to prevent them from doing it. And I can tell you this, correction staff is deeply impacted. Now, I don't care if the guy has murdered 15 people, but watching a human being dying or taking their own life or trying to save their lives, I can't even begin to tell you, as a corrections officer, I know dozens of CPR that I had to do when I was dealing with these kinds of situations. It stays with you, it haunts you, and there is a high rate of suicide in correction staff consequently. So this is one of those things that is a real problem in prisons and jails.
Len, by the way, I mean this as a compliment, but if I saw you in the street, I would think that you were a college professor or a botanist or a zoologist or something. I would never, a prison warden would be the last thing on planet Earth that would cross my mind.
But, I've been a college professor, so thank you.
You look like a college professor. You got the white beard going.
Yeah.
Columbia Correctional Institution, it's one compound, but it functions as 2 with an annex in the main building. Total of 3,000 inmates. Prison officials say that this prison has some of the most violent inmates in Florida. And when we get to a story that's going to be tough to tell here on YouTube, you'll understand why. This is just some of the stuff that's happened in Columbia. This is where Charlie Adelson is. 2010, a CO, a sergeant, was stabbed and killed. 2014, 2 inmates smuggled guns and shot themselves. That's one way to unalive yourself. 2016, correction officer stabbed. He survived. 2018, inmate attacked, mutilated, and killed. There was another one that year. There was 2 that year because I researched it. And 2019, 2 inmates died from drug overdoses. And I don't know how, the statistics aren't all the way up to date. So there might be a lot more going on. Joe, to you on this, I was reading about it. FCI Tallahassee, which is the federal institute, there was an investigation there. I mean, rat droppings and mold on the food, massive rats. You're talking like 1 foot long, fat rats. I mean, I understand these are some of the worst people, but we're a civilized society, and I mean, no matter what you think, doesn't there have to be some sort of element of where does that line have to be drawn, where there is some sort of humane regard for these people, even though a lot of them are really bad people?
Well, listen. Staff got to work in those conditions as well. So the inmates got to live, but we got to work in those conditions. We don't want those conditions. Part of the problem with the Federal Bureau of Prisons is a lot of these buildings are old. Okay, so from the union's point of view, we actually get involved with OSHA, try to get OSHA involved. We also get involved with congressional and try to get the budget to fix a lot of these old institutions. Tallahassee's one, Atlanta's one. They had to close MTC Manhattan because of where Epstein was at.
Mhm.
That was probably the worst institutions in the country. Lewisburg. I could go on and on and on. I could go on and on. I've been to a lot of them. They're old and they need repairs. And I agree. No one should, inmates shouldn't have to live through that, and staff shouldn't have to work through that, because it works both ways. Like I said, like we started this, we live with the inmates pretty much. 28 years for me in the feds, and I've seen guys there for 20 years. They've known me for 20 years. You get to know these guys, and they shouldn't have to deal with stuff like that, those conditions. This is not a third world country. We're talking about Federal Bureau of Prisons, Department of Justice. You have to deal with these type of conditions. Like I said, I have gotten involved with OSHA, calling OSHA to fix these conditions on the behalf of my staff and on behalf of the inmates. Because if the inmates are living in those conditions, guess what's going to happen? They're going to take it out on the COs, because we're the first ones they see, and that's when you get the hostilities. We don't want that. We don't want that at all. So we try to have good living conditions. That way it averts crisis and hostilities and a possible riot. I've been involved like 2 or 3 disturbances in my career, bad ones.
Joe, would you consider over this really long career and these guys who are serving life, do you consider any of them friends? Any guys that you even stay in touch with or anything who are still on the inside? Never.
I look, like I said, I'm professional, man. Like I said, like I've known guys I'll go from place to place, from one institution. I'll go to like Lewisburg, and they'll recognize me because inmates get transferred, and I go and visit, and they'll recognize me, and that's it.
Wow. And when you're how often? Go ahead, Len. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. I've got to say, since I retired, I have made friends with a lot of people that were former inmates and convicts, and they've reformed their lives, and they're productive members of society. And you know what? To me, they're human beings that are quality human beings that are doing some real good work out in the community now. So I feel respected by being their friend.
Diana Johnson here with a super chat. How many jails, Len, back to you, are being run by private for-profit companies? I was a CSO in San Diego in '78, one of the first females hired to work in male facilities. My job was contracted out, and they offered me $5 less an hour. That is the American way. But how many are being run by private?
I can tell you there are I don't know of many jails that are being contracted out by private companies, but prisons are. There is a large number of prisons in this country that are operated by, Geo Group, it's Core Civic. There's lots of private companies that are doing it. In a way, the agencies are happy to sort of wash their hands off of those things, because the liability, all the lawsuits and everything else, it goes sort of away with the private company. They bring in their own insurance carriers. The agencies then freed up to not worry about that amount of litigation. So it helps them. They don't have to deal with, the workers, the employee contracts and everything else. So agencies save a lot of money by privatizing, but overall the quality goes down. Private companies are there for their stockholders and share prices. And, if I can cut corners here or there to just make the facility run, then those are things that happen. Now, on the other side of it, there have been numerous lawsuits, and many agencies have taken away private prisons from these private operators because it's become a public nightmare, and so they've had to take it back also. So it goes back and forth, but there are a lot of privately run prisons.
By the way, tomorrow night, 7 p.m. Eastern Time, juror number 18 from the Lori Vallow Daybell trial is joining us for a one-on-one interview. It should be interesting. Of course, she is the so-called doomsday cult mom. Tomorrow, 7 p.m. Eastern, juror 18. To you, Joe, I've asked Tommy this question. Do you think Charlie has been extorted in prison yet since he's been in this Columbia Correctional? What delicious irony and karma. He, by the way, as part of his defense, said that he was extorted by the Latin King gang. So question number one, Jersey Jen, all the best to you. She's a friend of the show. Is going through a tough time. She just lost her mom. What are the chances he's already been extorted, Joe Rojas?
Well, if he's out in open pop, yes, because he's a known figure. That's not uncommon, believe it or not. You get extorted for protection. That's not uncommon, especially
Day one.
Joe, if you see this going down, like if you're walking by and you hear an inmate saying you got to give me $50 a week, do you have to do something? Do you have to report it? What do you do?
Yeah, I'll probably pull the inmate aside and ask him some questions, and I would probably report it, and just for his safety. Because yes, that's like, again, that's my job. And the last thing you want to see is a homicide or a stabbing in front of you, and then you could become a victim on top of Charlie. So at all costs, yes.
These prison shows are good for me. I lose weight. I was at the gym trying to get back to the gym, and it's good for me. I drop weight from stress. Tam Gold says, Tommy Scoville, is Charlie Adelson going to get special treatment because of his money and political family connections? His family does have some connections politically. I hope not. Justice is supposed to be blind. Joe Rojas is shaking his head no. Tommy Scoville is shaking his head no. How are you so sure, Tommy Scoville?
Because there's just no chance of that happening. I don't care how much cash you got. You're not buying any. All of the stuff you see in movies and stuff like that, those days are so freaking long gone. I did time with guys that were worth astounding amounts of money. And it just doesn't help you. You're just an inmate and a number. You're not any different than the cat. At least in the feds, man. And I was in there with some really famous dudes. I could drop some, like really, really big Meech. Right? I was in
Scoville. Give us who's the biggest name you were in there with? Give us one.
Joe Casey, former Colombo crime head of the Colombo crime family. That was a pretty big one.
By the way,
I was in Tucson with him before they ruined that yard and turned. See where
hold on.
His name Chauvin got stabbed. That was a great year. You guys.
How is a mobster treated in prison? I assume with respect. You don't mess with
royalty. Like royalty. The guys treat him really, really well. They treat him with a lot of respect because people inside, what they value most is somebody that just does their time and shuts up, right? Doesn't talk, doesn't testify, doesn't do anything. And the old gangsters, if they're on main line, it's because they did not, testify. So they got a lot of respect, and he had a lot of it. And then I was on the medical yard with Drew Peterson when he was there. I was in medical with Drew Peterson. He was kind of a big name too.
I tell the barista tomorrow. I'm going to tell the barista when I'm ordering my frappuccino. I was on the main line. I was on the main line.
That's it.
Meanwhile, I was a reporter wearing loafers in Tucson in the heat. My feet got too hot. It drove me crazy. My feet were on fire. One day I'm in Tucson in the middle of summer, like in August, and literally my photographer was Alfonso Fonzi, and I'm like, dude, my feet are on fire. He's like, you're wearing leather shoes in the desert in August. You're outside. Yeah, it was smart. I learned my lesson. Mischief managed here. Len, to you, what are your opinions on the programs with dogs or cats in prisons? How well are they working? That's the only thing that would get me through prison is if I had a dog to hang out with. But are they doing that more, Len?
Yeah, I think they are, and they're very therapeutic. I think there's a lot of benefit to it. I've seen some really violent people that would sit there and cry if you tried to take their dog away, and they would just absolutely just go to pieces and go, no, it teaches them empathy. It gives them, for some of these people, that's the first time they've actually experienced caring for someone, or loving someone and getting, love back in return. And even if it's an animal, it's life-changing. I worked in a prison in Nevada where we started the horse program. They made a movie out of it called Mustang. I was a lieutenant in that facility when we started that horse program, and we took a bunch of wild horses and we got a guy who was a really good trainer, and it was a horse gentling program. We never used any force, and we got a group of guys who volunteered to come in and work with the horses, and it was life transforming doing those kinds of things. We had a thing called Puppies Up for Parole. We would get dogs from the animal shelter. We would, gently train them, but always train them to be just companion dogs, never bite dogs, and those kinds of things. And I would say that the incidence of violence and aggression went down significantly when we had those kinds of programs. I'm a big proponent for those kinds of things.
Joe, to you, you talked about this a little bit, and I want to ask you about his daily routine right now. But does Charlie have extra protection or observation because he's notorious? Is he probably on direct observation now for his first few days? Are they checking on his cell constantly? What's going on?
I would probably think either they put him on suicide watch for his own protection, or in the SHU or special housing, just to watch over him. Because this guy's never been in prison, so he's used to the fining and dining. So when you send somebody like that to go to prison, it is a big shock. So they should probably put him in isolation and watch over him, make sure and check on him by professionals, psychiatrists, doctors, and everything. Because it is, think about it, it's a big culture shock.
And Joe, let me ask you this: what percentage of the inmates know who he is at this point?
Look, inmates watch TV, inmates read papers. They know who he is. There's no secrets in prison.
Yeah,
they know who you are.
Yeah, and Joe, let me ask you this: what is his? Walk us through his day. What time is he woken up? What does he do? What does he do next? Take us through a day.
Well, I haven't worked in the state in a while, but as I recall, it's 6 o'clock, 6:30 is wake up time. You get ready for chow or breakfast. I know I'm using prison lingo. You get ready for breakfast, you eat your breakfast, and then usually by 8 o'clock, you go to work. And you can work as an orderly, you can work depending on the institution, what kind of programs they have. You work from 8 to 11, go to your housing unit, get ready for the noon meal, go to the noon meal, then by 12:30, you go back up to go to work, or if you have to go to school, like try to get your GED, you go to classes. And then at 3:30, get ready to go back inside, get ready for count. And the feds, it's a 4 o'clock count. And I believe when I worked for the state of Florida, it was 4 o'clock count as well. And it's a stand-up count. And you count, and then around 5 o'clock, whenever count clears, you go for the evening meal. And the state's a little different. In the state, they align you by housing unit. They line up, and you go in a straight line into the chow hall. And then in the state, it's a time limit, the amount of time you can eat. You just can't hang out and stay there. And then after you eat chow, you go
real
back
quick.
to the
This
unit.
is, by the way, you're looking at the video here of Columbia Correctional in Florida, where Charlie is. Keep going. I'm sorry, Joe.
No, that's okay. So after the chow, you go to the unit, and then you go to the rec, and then they call you to go into the rec yard. And then after your rec is over, you go inside and get ready for count again. And then I believe 9 o'clock is count in the state. I can't remember. It's been a while. And then 10:30 lights are out and you go to bed. It's very structured.
I kind of like fun. That's the only thing I would like about prison. Yeah, that's the only thing I would like, because I need to be very structured. I have ADHD, I think, and so without structure, maybe it would be good. Maybe prison would be good for me. Who knows? We have a former inmate on every once in a while. His name is Larry Levine. He was in the federal prison system, and it always blows me away when he says this. He said the 11 years he spent in federal prison were some of the best in his life because he never had to pay a mortgage, never had to deal with the IRS. He just hung out. Everything was taken care of. But that's called seeing the glass half full, if I've ever heard.
Yeah.
He's a bit of a. I would say this to Larry's face. He's a bit of a crazy dude, but I don't know. So we're looking. This is Charlie
Mhm.
Adelson's current home right now, and it's freaking me out a little. It's creepy to watch. I actually just saw an interview on News Nation, Tommy, with your old friend Drew Peterson, and the guy used to be a big talker. He looks decrepit. He almost fell over during the interview. He's using a cane, but he said that he just sleeps all day and watches TV, and there's no job for him in prison. He said all the jobs were taken. Tommy, did you have a job in prison? How hard or easy is it to get one, and how important is it for your mental health?
It's that there's nothing more important for my mental health. There are guys in there that don't want anything to do with it, but that never made any sense to me, man. I wanted to chew up as much time as I could. I got into the Unicorp program in the feds, and
Great program.
that was a really that was for 8 hours a day you're just a factory worker, and it's amazing because inside the prison system, it's a very racial environment where it's very structured that way. But you get into a factory and you got a Mexican guy, a white guy, black guy, all working, side by side. And
what were you making? What were you making? Shout out to Nikki.
All the uniforms for the people in the military. My line was I was the QA for all of the Air Force, the blouses for the Air Force.
Wow.
And 8 hours a day. Good work if you can get it.
That's a good program, though. It's good for recidivism. It's a really good program. You learn a skill, you learn a trade. The pay is better than the normal pay. The Unicorp.
The pay's way better. Yeah, the pay's way better. I was making like $120 a month.
It's about $3 an hour compared to like 20 cents an hour, depending on the
cents an hour. It's 19
right?
cents an hour.
All right, yes. Absolutely.
Yeah. Wow. Len, how about from Hey Moan, a friend of the show? She's been here from the beginning. Are there favorite prisoners that are treated more nicely, like we see in prison shows and movies? Are there yard favorites by the staff?
The minute you make somebody a yard favorite, the next day you're gonna find him shanked.
Yeah.
No one wants to be the teacher's pet in a prison. I mean, it's just not something that you want. I mean, it's to the point where there would be times as an officer, I would try to go talk to an inmate because I was, just in the normal course of business. And the inmate would talk to me. He's like, why are you talking to me? Like, what is going on? And he would make it so obvious that he did not want to talk to me, just so that all the other people that were in the area would clearly know that he was not snitching on anyone, he wasn't being treated special.
Ooh, Rachel, from Rachel, Tommy, did you meet anyone inside who had come directly from their soft and comfy Playboy, Ferrari, periodontist life? I think she's talking about Charlie. No doubt it's a gnarly adjustment for everyone. By the way, Tommy came from a pretty comfortable life himself. But Tommy, did you meet anyone in there? And look at this, by the way, Bedford, England, named the worst prison in England. So they're having their own issues with cockroach and disrepair issues. But Tommy, did you meet someone who came into the system who was from privilege?
Yeah, all the time. It happens all the time. But it's a culture shock, even if, it's such a different world under the best of circumstances. If you were running and gunning and you're a gangster, when you pull up to the prison, like Lewisburg, for instance, I was in that bus with some famous, like big time gang members and gangsters, and it was silent. I mean, nobody on that bus was making a noise. We pulled up there and people were just looking at that wall going, oh my God, but what I think what's going to get him there is that heat thing. I'm telling you, if you've never done time in a prison without air conditioning, it is really a unique experience. It's really rough. Is.
Yeah. It's rough.
I would just be like, can't you let me out? Can I just go out? And they would say no.
I tried that.
Prison. Yeah.
I tried that several times.
I would ask really nicely. Clown World, to Len, what are the various methods that are employed to get contraband into the prison? Tommy has mentioned on previous shows that drugs are rampant in prisons. How is this happening? Why can it not be stopped? But how is this stuff? How does it come in?
Okay, so there's multiple ways that these get done in. So, we actually had to install netting over one of our prisons because people figured out how to drop drugs using drones. So So that's one option, especially if you're if it's a downtown jail facility, it's very easy to drop something there. But in a big yard, it's hard to kind of locate the location where you would be doing that. People would fill up drugs in tennis balls, throw it over the fence, and then there would be a rendezvous point. Somebody would go get it. There would be inmates obviously bringing it inside their bodies. I mean, I had guys that were coming in for 60 days in jail, and they would literally fill up a condom with all kinds of drugs, enough to last them for the 2 months. I mean, I had one guy who brought in a tattoo ink inside his body, and we discovered it. I mean, so people bring stuff in their bodies, and of course, there are officers that can bring drugs in, and I've been involved in investigations and arrests and prosecutions of those kinds of officers who've been compromised and they bring in drugs. It's usually the easiest way to bring in drugs is to have a staff member who you can compromise to do that. That goes into the prison culture. If you have a really good culture of not allowing that, somebody who's really charming, like Mr. Adelson, for example, or someone, they can pick somebody off the pack, sort of be able to identify the weak officer, the person that is vulnerable, to praise and whatever, just to get them away from the rest of the staff. And that's how they break them apart and then compromise them and get them to bring in drugs. I mean, all you need is one person compromised, and that person will bring in enormous amount of drugs. And again, I've been involved in a number of arrests of these types of staff who've lost their jobs, who've lost their livelihood, have gone to prison, even for doing those kinds of things. So, I mean, it's a game all day long, and that's what happens in prisons, and you just have to constantly be on the lookout to stop these things from happening.
Wow. Melissa Simok, Tommy, is that a Star Trek uniform behind you? What is that behind you?
It is. That was signed by Captain James T. Kirk. That was worn in the show, in the original 66 series.
And how the hell did you get that?
Because I'm a captain.
Oh, there you go. Captain Tommy Scoville. Yeah, there you go. Look at that.
Yeah. I'm not as famous as that one yet, but I'm working on it.
So let me tell you a Charlie Adelson prison story. This isn't his story, but this happened there a few years back. I have to try to tell this. This is what the COE warned me about. Let's pretend that these right here are matzo balls, right? So, and this right here is a giraffe. So he choked the giraffe until the giraffe was no longer alive. And then he took out the matzo balls and put the matzo balls in a cup in his cell. He took off this right here off of the guy that he just eliminated in his cell. And he put the Van Gogh, we'll call this the Van Gogh, the EAR, I can say ear. So he takes the ear and he puts that on a chain. He wears the chain with the ear right after he commits this crime and goes to the mess hall. What do you guys call it? Tommy, what's it called? It's not a mess hall. What's it called?
Chow hall.
Chow hall. Yeah. I knew I was close. He goes to the chow hall with this guy's ear around his neck, and the matzo balls from that guy are in a cup. And he told the prisoners he was going back after chow to eat the matzo balls. Meanwhile, this guy was no longer, the guy that he did this to is obviously no longer with us. But this is a horrendous crime. And when asked why, I told Carm this story, but I used the real words. And I told Carm this story. By the way, for Len and Joe, Carm is my mom, who's a sometimes host of this show. Carm said, why did this inmate do this to the other inmate? And the quote was, he was pestering me. I love it. Black Widow, what is a matzo ball? That is a matzo ball is Jewish food. It's like something you have in soup. So you guys don't have that in the Republic of Ireland. Tommy Scoville, this story that I'm telling you about, this happened in Charlie's prison. Did you ever witness anything this horrific in your time? I mean, would you see these sorts of things playing out, Tommy?
I never watched one. I've been on yards where it happened right down the hall. In fact, when I was at FC, I was at the FCI that Chauvin got stabbed at, right? Across the street is the Tucson. Across the street is the USP. That's the dropout yard. But it's where you go to the hole if you get in trouble at the FCI, because the FCI doesn't have a hole. So I got in trouble at the FCI and I got transected across the street to go to the SHU, segregated housing unit. And a guy came into our hallway and started talking about what he had done to a chomo the night before in his cell. And for 2 hours at night, he talked about, it just sounded like something from a horror film. It was the most ridiculous crap you ever heard. So when I was going to the next day, I was going to yard with one of the cops. And I said, boss, what's the deal with the guy you brought in last night? I said, screaming about all that. He goes, oh, no, every word of that was true. He said, that dude just did things to a guy in a body that he's like, I'm never, ever going to be able to unsee. He said it was the most messed up. But he took this guy apart, literally. And I said, how did he not get caught? And he said, every time a cop would walk, he'd run to the door and go, hey, man, I asked for boxers. And honestly, that usually gets you ignored.
Yeah.
But
Len, I mean, what's a deterrent for that? Because this guy was a lifer. He was never seeing the light of day. I think at one point the guy who did this to him was actually on death row and moved into this prison. So is there any deterrence, Len?
So, you know, these guys are all classified based on risk factors. So a max custody individual who's committed, let's say, you know, double murder is going to be housed not with the DUI offender, right? They're going to be housed with somebody who's equally dangerous based on risk factors. So most of your max yards are going to be filled with all dangerous people. So, you know, at that point, it really becomes about prison politics, how good you are at playing the prison politics or staying out of prison politics, which is probably the best thing to do. But once you get involved in those kinds of prison entanglements where you get involved in gangs or drugs or protection, you know, all those kinds of rackets that go on in the prison world, you are putting yourself in more danger. And ultimately you get into a situation where you end up feeling like, well, you know, I need to get out of this yard. And so they'll either, you know, try to get themselves out in a way that it doesn't look like it's protective custody. So they'll get into a fight just so that it looks like, hey, I have a separatee issue here because I can't be with this guy, so move me to a different prison. So they'll play all of these kinds of, you know, daily kind of routines that you go through just to survive. It's really survival. And that's ultimately the game. And unfortunately, sometimes you end up in a cell with a really potentially bad dude that you have no clue that he's capable of doing that, because yesterday he was bumming coffee off you and he was, you know, just shooting the breeze with you and you were totally fine. But today, you know, you snore too loud and the next thing you know, you don't wake up because he's upset. So, he literally said he was being pestered. Like that's Yep. I mean, I've seen a lot of people get assaulted because they snore.
Snoring. I was going to say, so many dead people for snoring, you wouldn't believe it.
Really?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I have nothing to say other than
that's a big one.
I'd probably get shanked for that. Nancy D. Back to you, Len, here. Have you, I already asked Joe about this. Have you ever been in a riot or held hostage? Have you ever been in my cousin was in what's PA? It was Pennsylvania.
Pennsylvania.
Yeah, I thought Pennsylvania. Oh, I guess he was in, I don't know. Have you ever been in a tough situation, Len?
Yeah, I've been in a few riot situations where people took on some of the housing units and they set fires and, you know, barricaded. And then, you know, we had to go in with the CERT team and try to extricate the leaders. And, you know, we got into fights. Those kinds of things have happened, but I would like to say that it has been very few, because the places that I ended up, at least given the opportunity to manage, I always believed that I needed to be out in the yard and I needed to talk to the inmates almost on a daily basis. I would go sit in the dining room and talk to the inmates and have lunch with them. And I would just make sure that I'd eat with all the groups so no one thought that anybody was special. I'd be in the kitchen. Sometimes I would serve the food just so that people knew that I wasn't going to just hide in my office kind of thing. It opened up lines of communication like you wouldn't believe. I had a great rapport with the people that were housed there. And, most of the time they would tell me, hey, if you are trying to keep this place calm, move this guy before he starts something. And it was a great way to manage institutions by really having that kind of a rapport with people.
That's really interesting, and it's great that you did that. Joe, to you, this is from the COE here. There are high-level Latin King gang members at Columbia Correctional Institute, where Charlie was moved to, where he is right now. A well-known Latin King member was sentenced to 3 life sentences in 2018. Now, part of his defense was that he says he was extorted by the Latin King gang. Is this going to be a big problem for him when he encounters Latin King? What's up, Dwayne Harris, coming to us from Detroit? Is this going to be a big problem for him when
if
Latin
that's
King
what he
gang...
thinks? Yes, it'll be, because they know who he is. So yes, of course.
So I mean, give me a little more. Give me a little more. Like,
if he fears for his life, he's probably going to ask people, because they're going to get him. I mean, obviously, high notoriety of the case. Yeah, it's only going to be a matter of time.
Till what? Till they get him, or what?
To the extortive, get them both. I mean, it's prison life. I mean, I don't want to sound callous, but
yeah,
this is what goes down.
And let me ask you this: I don't know, if you were a betting man, what are the chances that Charlie does not make it through this experience alive? That someone gets him while he's serving time? Is it a pretty high percentage?
I think it is. I think it is, especially in the state. Remember, they're having staffing issues, so you compound that with how old some of the prisons is. The structure and everything. You got the structure that's old. You've got the staffing issues. I don't know what type of maintenance cameras they have. It's not good times for Charlie.
Len, back to you. Yeah, I'm sorry, but Len, just I want you to finish your thought. But what's the number one thing Charlie needs to do to survive? Is there something he can do? But go ahead with your thought.
I would say go on in PC and stay in PC.
Yeah, PC.
Protective custody and literally do his entire time there.
Can he request that? Can he request to be put into?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, sure.
But he would literally, that means he would be living in a cell the rest of his life with 1 hour on the yard by himself or something?
Not necessarily. Yeah, because there's PC yards where they have a lot of other protective custody individuals that are similarly situated, and they could come out and have day room time and yard time together. So he could have a sort of a lifestyle that's a little bit more manageable, more like a general population yard in a PC facility. But yeah, definitely he needs to PC. But because he's named a gang, I would be really surprised if there isn't a green light on him already.
There's already a green light on.
There is. What they
green light term, I assume. Hold on, green light is like a death sentence here. What's going on?
It's hit on sight.
It's hit on sight. No permission needed.
That's what happened to Whitey Bulger. The minute he was transferred from Coleman, which I don't know why they sent him to Hazleton, the minute they saw him, it was done. It was a hit on sight.
Hold on. I got questions here. Hold on. So within this prison, word goes out and there's a green light who puts this word out? Joe, tell me, who puts this word out? Len seems to think there's a good chance there's already a green light on.
Well, we call it inmate.com. Okay. Inmates have their own network. Okay. And that's what we call it. Inmate.com. Am I wrong? And they get communications for whoever, from prison to prison, state to state, city to city. It happens. They know it. When Whitey Bulger went up to Hazleton, they already knew he was going up there. Nobody's supposed to know, but they already knew. So he got in. He wanted to, and he should have been PC up in Hazleton. because number one, he was a snitch.
It was that far from his home.
Yeah, number one, he was a snitch. So I don't
Yep.
even know why they transferred him to Hazleton. Well, he went to Hazleton, and then they should have PC'd him, but he wanted to go in the yard. So he left. He got there like at 8 o'clock at night. They put him in the housing unit at 10 o'clock. 6 o'clock, he was already dead. 6:30.
Wow. Len, I mean, do you think it could be that dramatic for, I mean, it's already been 5 days for Charlie, but what makes you so sure that there's a green light on him?
Well, because of the gang involvement and because of the fact that he came in court and statements were made about a gang that is known to be very dangerous. Anytime you go in that direction, I mean, you are taking a massive risk on your personal life. So, I mean, there are people in the gang always trying to sort of move up the hierarchy also. And this is like catnip, and someone's going to say, hey, I'll take it on just so that they can move up the ranks. And there will be constantly people that are going to try to do that. And some people just want to do it just because, like maybe not Mike Tyson. If Mike Tyson was in prison, I would probably think that people would think about it a little bit more before they took on someone like Mike Tyson. But everyone else, yeah, it's fair game.
Wow. By the way, the story I just told you about the matzo balls and the guy wanted to eat them. By the way, COE, it sounds pretty good now, aside from the story. So, right after this happened, it was right after this matzo ball story happened that there was a massive gang fight at Charlie's prison as well between the Bloods. I didn't even know there was a gang called the Cutthroats. They began stabbing each other with knives. Tommy, you've heard of the Cutthroats. I've never heard of the Cutthroats. Wow. So they started stabbing. This was literally the same day as the guy wanted to eat the guy's matzo balls. There's this going on. Look at this comment. I feel, I wanted to read that comment. Joel, I feel like you're less and less anxious about prison. You seem hardened now. Stay hard, baby. I'm tough now.
Right?
Tommy, this was an interesting comment that I lost, but someone was asking if there's a chance that they will move him to a worse prison, so that possibly he would want to flip because there's other potential trials coming down the pike. Is that just fantasy land, or is there any reality to that?
Yeah, that's pretty much fantasy land.
Yeah,
they're not. Once they're into the, like, people tend to start blending jail and prison, but once they leave jail and they get into prison, they're no longer. That's a whole different world, man. They've graduated.
And the prosecutors don't have a lot of reach inside state prisons.
No, they don't. Or there's just not a lot of that going on.
This is a funny question. Tommy, Jody Johnson wants to know if you can have a CPAP for whatchamacallit. What's that called?
Yep.
Sleep apnea. Can you have that?
Absolutely can. Yeah, you absolutely can.
You can?
It's a medical condition. Yeah.
It's a medical
really?
condition. I had a cellmate that had one. It gets really handy too, because all of that tubing and everything comes in great.
I've seen
a lot of moonshine if you got a guy with a CPAP machine.
Tommy, these are some interesting questions. What happens if you've got flatulence in the prison system? Is that a problem?
You betcha.
You
learn real quickly. Yeah, you learn real quickly that there is a method that you can sit down on the toilet and make sure that leaves the room. And if you don't do it really well and get really good at it, then you have a real problem. Because
hang on a second. Hang on a second. I've got follow-up questions here. So you develop a method in prison to go quietly or to redirect the odor?
Odorless.
So when a prison toilet flushes, you're used to being in the real world where a flush is like a gallon and a half. When a prison toilet flushes, you could flush a full blanket, right? I mean, this side around, a full woolen blanket will go down like this and be gone.
Why?
Because if you didn't, we would plug it up and jam it. I mean, they make it really hard to plug a prison toilet.
Yeah. Really?
It is almost impossible to plug a prison toilet. You really got to work at it. 3 or 4 good-sized woolen blankets tied with knots in them. But other than that, it's not happening. So with 8 to 10 gallons going down at once, there's this very serious suction. And you make sure that if you have flatulence, that suction gets rid of it. Because if not, the fellas don't have a great sense of humor in 49 square feet.
So you've got to time it with the flush. This is something, if you don't think you learn something new every day on STS, you're out of your mind. COE, you better cut this right here for a future sizzle reel. So this is one of the most amazing things I've ever learned. Look at this. Ned Smith says, I think we've reached a new low on STS. So Len, you were going to add to that.
I was going to say, back in the day, you used to be able to have lighters, and that was a great tool to sort of,
burn that off.
Immediately deal with that issue. But we've removed lighters from prisons now, so I guess we go with the toilet.
Wow. Tommy, when you were in prison, you never saw a lighter? You can't get do people get lighters into prisons? How do you light whatever you're smoking?
You take a battery, like say this is a cell battery, right? You scrape off this much of the bottom of the battery. Then you take a piece of tin foil and you put it from here to here. And when you make contact, that thin piece of foil is going to burst into flames. And you have to have a piece of toilet paper rolled up and put right on top of that battery. And when you do, that little piece of foil will catch the toilet paper on fire, and that's your cigarette lighter. Wow, it's a process.
So crazy. Mary Patterson, do you think, Joe Rojas, that Charlie has a cellmate right now?
No, I'm sure he's a cell alone. He's by himself right now. It's probably, like I say, he's probably on suicide watch or an observation, one or the other. He doesn't have a cellmate.
Another big issue, and then we'll slowly start to wrap this bad boy. This is the fastest 90. It's over 90, 110 minutes of your life right now. Some people, I think, are getting annoyed with the toilet talk, but hey, it's part of reality. That is part of, not Lindsay Shea. She said, that's hard to say. I'm obsessed with STS. Wesley John Holmes says, perhaps we can put it on the blooper reel. He is in Tokyo from Australia originally. This is like the night Joel veered off into details about SEX and PRISON by. Oh, there we go. She's not happy. See you, Catherine. See you in another show. But Len, there's a drug called K2. I've never even heard of it, but I guess it's synthetic marijuana. How big a problem is that right now within the prison system? Just drugs in general.
Just drugs in general, it's a big problem. The biggest problem, I think, is fentanyl, because there's a lot of deaths related to that. Even handling it can be fatal. That methamphetamines, I mean, that's always a big problem. I've had dealings with guys. They came in, they got arrested, internal possession, the bag bursts inside, and you just find somebody laying on the ground foaming at their mouth. It happens quite a bit. So yeah, it's an ongoing issue. But a lot of facilities are using. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but they're using, drug screening, like airport screening kind of thing. So as new people are brought in, they stand on this machine which sort of scans them, body scanners, to make sure that there's nothing in there. A lot of times when you find something inside somebody's body, then you'd have to, dry cell them, which is, you put them in a room with no toilet and a plastic bag, and, until they take care of business, and then you move on to the next guy.
By the way, people are offended about the toilet talk, but I'll tell you what, the numbers are ticking up. It's like,
I know I was about to say, it ain't dropping though, is it?
It's like Howard Stern. Those who hate those who love Howard Stern listen for 30 minutes a day. Those who hate Howard Stern listen on average an hour and 30 minutes a day. Yeah. I'm no Howard Stern. Rosemary Romero. Could Charlie request a move because he knows he's in prison for life and he wants to try different prisons, hoping to get close to a Miami prison? Joe, what about that?
I mean, you can request it, doesn't mean it's going to happen. So up to the administration. There's a lot of factors involved. You got your unit team, case manager, everything's involved. It's just because you request it doesn't mean it's going to happen. So it has a lot of factors. The type of sentence you're in, type of facilities in Miami. I don't see it happening. Just personally, it's just too many factors, and it's just not snapping the fingers and you get to be moved. It takes some time to get transferred.
And definitely not for a newbie.
Yeah, not for a newbie. So
Yeah,
you gotta earn your time. You gotta earn your time like everybody else.
Yep.
No favorites. They don't, like I said, inmate's an inmate. They don't care who you are. You're gonna do your time like everybody else. You gotta earn it. And it might take 10 years to 15 years by the time he goes down to Miami. So
I have to agree with Jenny Price. This is a very informative panel. Right now, Tommy, because you were not in his shoes, but you were in his shoes. But and Joe has talked about this quite a bit tonight. But Charlie Adelson, this isn't a temporary ordeal for him. He's not like, I have to survive this for 5 years or 10 years. This is the rest of his natural life. What is going on inside his mind right now between his ears?
He has got to be, I got to agree with both of them that more than likely they've got him on the watch, right? He's not in general population. He is right now on either the unalive watch or just the observation. But either way, he's in a cell alone. He's probably wearing a dress with Velcro on the top, Velcro on the sides, and a big thick blanket so that there's nothing he could do to hurt himself. And he's terrified. The green light that we were talking about earlier, of all of the gangs, if I were going to get one of them angry at me, I wouldn't have picked that one. I really would not have. That would not have been one of the ones I would have picked. For real.
Tommy, could you unalive yourself? Someone wanted to know by sticking your head in the toilet and flushing it.
You know what? Probably not. But you would be surprised.
These are the questions.
He's right. There's been a lot of really creative ways that people have done it. I've seen things that I promise if I told you, you'd think I was making up. But there are some really creative ways that people have decided to leave this planet when incarcerated.
Wow. I always say there's one way to be born and 10 trillion ways to leave this earth.
But since we have a guy that knows NSP, Joel, you would have loved this. I mean, when you think about being scared of prison, whenever you say this, I honestly think of NSP. Because when you went to the Chow Hall, Nevada State Prison, when you went to the Chow Hall at Nevada State Prison, you had to go through a tunnel to get to it, right? It was the most frightening thing. I mean, guys that had been there their entire life, you'd get to the top of it and you'd watch guys slowly get. And as soon as they got to the top, the speed would triple and you would just go whoop and come out the other side. And that tunnel smelled like copper. And one day I was walking with the CO and I go, what does that copper stink? And he goes, you're kidding, right? I said, no. He's like, all of the stuff that's been spilled in here. He's like, that's years and years of, But it got to a point where like on chicken night, I just stayed home because I was so afraid to run through that tunnel. And I was 6'2" and 245 pounds and hitting 3 wheels, and I wasn't going through that tunnel. Yeah.
By the way, how long does it take to get used to prison food, Tommy?
You don't get used to prison food.
You don't.
You don't.
Like, do you like gag eating it? Like, how do you eat it? I mean,
you buy a lot of stuff from the commissary and you make your own food. And then you buy a lot of stuff that you can get out of the back door of the kitchen. The reason that kitchen food sucks so bad is that the inmates are stealing anything that's halfway decent and selling it out the back door, right? So when you go for chicken day, if it's chicken soup, there's 3 pieces of chicken in that soup because the rest of it all got sold. And the guys on the yard are using that stuff to make real meals. That's usually how it works. So you eat
conjugal visits. I don't think they're allowed in the state of Florida. Len, are conjugal visits allowed in California or Nevada?
Not anymore. I think they're a thing of the past.
Not the kind he's open for.
I think I detect sarcasm here. Joel, your questions are so well thought out. But let me tell you something. I know it doesn't seem like it, but I do prepare for these shows. $10 super sticker for Dwayne from Dwayne Harris in Detroit. He also gifted memberships. Thank you so much, Dwayne. You are ridiculously generous. Yes, Joel, the shows for adults. It's great. Without further ado, it's time to wrap this up. Tommy Scoville, he is a friend of the show. He's a best guest. He's on here all the time. Comes from a privileged background. The guy was a professional skier. He was a president of a publicly traded company. He had his life going on the right track till he tried to come off of prescription meds, and that took him down a dark path, and he became a bank robber, and that's never a good thing. And so he did some time in federal prison. I have to agree, this is fascinating and funny. People are going to get mad that there's any humor in this at all, but I always say my mother, she's a Holocaust survivor. The only thing she does is get through life with humor. We were laughing today as we were recording. She was an hour late, by the way, which was enough to, I don't know, it really drove me crazy. By the way, the guys at the recording studio love Carm, and they record all kinds of like gangster rap and all kinds of crazy stuff in this place. And they want Carm to, they're going to write and produce a rap song for Carm. They're like 25-year-old music, and they're like crazed and ready to do it. Tommy Scoville, he is a gentleman and a scholar. He now runs the Lifeboat channel on the YouTube to help people with sobriety. Tommy Scoville, if you were still in the joint and you were next door to Charlie Adelson and you guys were, I guess it's not dropping kites, but you're sending stuff back and forth. You're whispering through the vent like you see in the movie. What advice would you have for him today?
Honestly, and this is funny because you hear this in movies and stuff, and it's never, ever good advice. But I would say to him, the first dude that comes up that tries to extort you, you need to fire on this dude like there's no tomorrow. You need to let every guy there know that you're going to swing on anyone that tries to get cash out of you, that tries to take anything from you. If you draw a line in the sand, there are dudes who are going to step back and go, what do we got? Right? And he may have a shot at picking up the white boys on his side. Because in all honesty, if he does not get someone on his side really quickly, he isn't going to be here very long. He picked a really bad group of people to get angry at you. He really did.
Tommy, I mean, how hard or easy, by the way, this is him, how he's looking these days.
Oh, it looks like he's already making that. Maybe he's already making this.
What?
All he's missing is the goatee.
He's starting to look a little like the fellas.
Yeah. I mean, Tommy, what's the chance as a Jewish guy who is a periodontist that some white gang, 0%, right? They're not.
Yeah, no, it isn't a gang that he's looking for. It's just a couple of friends. There isn't a gang that's going to take him in. Unfortunately, all of the gangs that allow white folk in it are fairly anti-Semitic. That's
I was going to say, is there like a matzo ball mobster faction within prison? There's no Jewish gangs, I don't think we've covered that ground yet.
Yeah, there are a couple of organizations that there are some Jews that have ended up in, right? But no, there are no specifically Jewish gangs. But there are some very unusual spin-offs behind bars. But he needs some friends, and he needs it really quickly. There are some options. I don't think the brand, right? The white fellas probably not the option he's looking for, but there are some options, and he needs friends fast.
Joe Rojas spent his entire career in Florida. He was here 94 to 95, and then at the Federal Bureau of Prisons. He just retired. Congrats on your retirement. He worked as a correctional officer and then a teacher within the Bureau of Prisons. How is retired life, Joe? You happy to be on the outside full time?
It's boring.
But
actually, the good thing is I'm working for the union as a national rep, so I actually do a lot of training. I'll be in Miami next week training some union folks, and I'm going to go to Colorado, then San Antonio. So I'm actually doing training and showing people the do's and don'ts from the union point of view, from arbitration and EEO cases. So actually, that's what I enjoy doing. I like to teach.
Wow. And for you, from Moto 88, how did Len and Joe learn to leave what happens on the job there versus bringing it home? That must be a tough thing, Joe. How did you do that?
It is difficult, but I believe in the power of prayer. So I have my beliefs in Christ. So that's how I be able to detach work from home. And I really don't like talking about my work when I'm at home. I want to enjoy my family, my wife and kids, and watch a movie. That's how I detach. And it's worked for me. I've been healthy, wealthy, and wise. Not wealthy, but healthy and wise.
Close enough. 2 out of 3.
Yeah, Pam Wallace, superb panel tonight on STS. I would have to agree. This was one of my all-time favorite shows here. Dr. J actually went to dental school with Charlie Adelson. He's been a guest on the show. Can I visit, Chuck, or do you need to earn visitation rights? Joe, if Dr. J, and he's the kind of guy that actually I know Jay just a little bit from this show, but I feel like he's the kind of guy that might really go and visit him because he wants to hear from him. Would he be allowed to visit? What's the process for that?
It goes through the whole system. He has to make the recommendation. They got to do a background check on Dr. J for approval through the unit team. And if it gets approved, yes. But it has to go, it's just not automatic. They go through all kinds of background checks on each visitor. Make sure they're not affiliated with any terrorist groups or whatever, gangs, stuff like that. So yes.
By the way, I'm watching that number in the chat and it's ticking up a little bit more. Hard to believe at this hour too. We've been going for an hour and 54 minutes. This is insane. But look at Gen X Granny.
Prison toilet talk. He gets them every time.
Yeah. Everyone pretends to be outraged by it. Is there an email for STS? survivingthesurvivor@gmail. If it is hate mail, it's Tommy Scoville at gmail.com. Lastly, for Joe, and then we'll wind up here with Len. But Joe, I guess on a serious note, if you were doing prison consulting to the same point I just asked Tommy, what would you tell Charlie Adelson tonight?
Keep it to yourself. If you don't believe in religion, get into religion, because
find it.
Prayer does a lot of stuff. But mind your business. Don't be snitching, because snitches get ditches, So it really is. It's a different subculture from prison system to the streets.
By the way, if you didn't pick that up, Joe just said snitches get ditches. Out in the in this world, it's snitches get stitches, right. But in prison, it's
ditches. I said that on purpose. Yep. That's right. That's the prison subculture. Wow. So keep your head down and mind your business, and try to get into programming if you can. And Troubles gonna find you though, because of who he is. And don't be afraid to find the nearest CO and check in.
Yeah.
By the way, my father, may he rest in peace, was a psychiatrist for 40-something years. His favorite expression was "mind your business." Used to tell me that all the time. Just do it, mind your business, stay the course. Those were his three sayings. Brady Starr, this panel with these men need to come on again. Will you guys all come back again before we say goodbye? And
absolutely.
Here is Len's book one last time. Let me get this comment off here. It's been an absolute pleasure to have Lenard Vare. He spells it Lenard. So for some reason, I thought it was pronounced Lenard. So he looked at me crazy before we went on air. I was like, "Hey, Lenard." He's like, "No, it's Leonard, but there's no O in there." But
right.
I'm just giving myself some reassurance here. The book is called Elephant Keepers: Reflections of a Prison Warden. I'm going to buy this book. I want to read this. I don't have a copy yet, but I do want to get it, and I want to check it out. Sam and Barry saying thank you for another awesome show. Len Vare, almost 30 years of experience in inmate management. He worked in California and Nevada, also in the Napa County Jail. It must be funny, Len, going from like state prison in Nevada to the Napa. What's the Napa Valley County Jail like? You guys got guys who like didn't squeeze the grapes right, or what?
You believe it or not, we actually had a couple of serial killers there.
Really?
We had people there for murders. We had, pretty much everything you find everywhere else. But sure, we got a bunch of DUI offenders also. But those guys were like, they came in for the day, we let them out. 8 hours later, they sober up, we let them out. So there was a lot of that.
And you were talking a lot about like representing clients. Are you an attorney now? Or are you doing that as like a consultant?
No, I'm not an attorney, but I do sort of exclusively work doing litigation work on behalf of attorneys, different state agencies, different departments of corrections, and then plaintiffs. So inmates who may have committed suicide in a jail facility, their family members will hire an attorney to file a lawsuit, and then they bring me in as a consultant on those kinds of cases. I've worked on homicide cases, several deaths in custody cases. So that's kind of what I do on a full-time basis, in addition to the training work that I do on preventing suicides in jails, prisons, juvenile halls, etc.
Before I ask Len the last question, Tommy, because I see all these women, Tommy. I'm not jealous at all, but Tommy, when you were in the clink, in the joint, were you getting letters from women? Was that happening?
When I very first arrived in prison, I did. It died out pretty quickly, but when I first got into prison, because it takes so long for you to end up in the feds, people that had heard about the case had written. So when I got there was like a whole crap load of I don't know what you call it, fan mail. People that wanted to be pen pals with bank robbers. I don't know. Right.
Wow.
Probably not the people you want to spend a lot of time with, but yeah, there was.
Well, yeah. I could hang with you for days, Tommy Scoville, but that's just my weird mind here. Len, final question. Same thing I asked the other guys. What advice would you give? I know I'm going to get hate mail. Why are you asking for advice for Charlie Adelson? I'm just curious what they're going to say. But what would you tell Charlie Adelson as he's 5 days into being in one of the worst state prisons in Florida, which has not a great prison system, I don't think.
I'm going to take a little different approach on this, and I'll say that eventually things start to normalize, right? So when you first go in and you're given a pair of boxers that 50 other people have worn, and you used to drive a Ferrari, and now you're looking at these boxers stained and socks that have got holes in them, and you're like, "What? I'm supposed to wear this?" And shower shoes that maybe 15 other people have worn before you got to it, the orange shoes, whatever. It's a massive shock. But once you get through it, and it's just like anything else, if you can survive the first day, the first week, the first month, the first few months, first year, and you learn those survival skills and coping mechanisms and not allow it to overwhelm you, it is possible. It is possible because, Charlie Manson was in prison for 40 years. It is possible for people to do life sentences and sort of do turnarounds. And, there are people that go and get master's degrees in prison. So it is possible, but he's going to have to do some damage control, and he's going to have to do some, keeping his mouth shut and just keep it on the down low, just not create any kind of issues.
But I mean, he is an anomaly because he did throw the Latin King gang under the bus. So you do think he's got this target on his back. There's no doubt, right?
Absolutely. And if there are some gangs that are in virtually every state prison system, so there's the reach is very long. The other part is gangs will make alliances with other gangs too. So, if I don't have a guy in, say, Florida, and I'm a gang based in California, I got a friend of a friend of a friend who's got somebody there that'll do it for, whatever it takes. So there's always that threat. And, he's going to have to spend probably several years in PC before things normalize.
That is not a fate I wish on my worst enemy, but he got himself into this mess for killing Dan Markel. It's all about justice for Dan Markel. This was an amazing panel tonight. Big thanks to Joe Rojas, Lenard Vare. There is Dan Markel. That's what this is all about. And, of course, Tommy Scoville. Can't wait to have these guys back on. We'll get them back on as we get developments with both Charlie and Donna, and perhaps, who knows, Wendy and Harvey Adelson as well, because I think there's more Adelsons to fall in this horrific story. But thank you all for being here. Tomorrow night, 7 p.m. Eastern time. Again, juror number 18 from the Lori Vallow Daybell trial. Be here or be square. Be there or be square. One or the other. Look forward to having you back. Until then, love you, America, and see you soon. Panel, stick around 1 second.